Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His green scales gleamed under the bright lights as he studied the world below. This was his 18th conquest. 17 star systems had already fallen to his mighty fleet. This small system with its single inhabited world would be no different. The Vorthak Empire had rules for war. Every species they had ever fought understood these rules. First, you arrived with overwhelming force. Second, you gave the enemy time to surrender. Third, if they refused, you destroyed their military completely. Fourth, you accepted their formal surrender. It had worked perfectly for 300 years. Zektar adjusted his ceremonial armor and activated the communication system. The message would reach every radio, television, and computer on the planet below. He had given this speech so many times he could recite it without thinking. People of Earth, his voice boomed across space. I am Commander Zektar of the Vorthak Empire. Your world is now surrounded by my fleet. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Prepare your leaders for formal capitulation. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. This is your only warning. He cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. How long before they respond with their surrender terms? Usually within 6 hours, Commander, the officer replied. Sometimes the primitive worlds take longer to gather their leaders. Meanwhile, 300,000 miles away on Luna Base, Lieutenant Jake Miller nearly dropped his coffee when the alien message finished playing. The young communication officer had been expecting routine traffic reports from Earth cargo ships. Instead, he had just received humanity's first contact with an alien species, and it was a declaration of war. Jake's hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication button. Within minutes, the message was being broadcast to every military base, government building, and news station on Earth. The response was not what Commander Zektar expected. Captain Lisa Rodriguez was eating lunch in the cafeteria of Defense Command when her aide burst through the doors. Captain, you need to see this right now, the young soldier said, his face pale. Lisa followed him to the communication center where Jake's message was playing on repeat. She listened to the alien ultimatum, twice before speaking. How many ships? She asked. Our deep space sensors show at least 200 vessels, Captain, Jake reported. They're massive. Each one is bigger than our largest battleship. Lisa nodded slowly. She had spent 15 years in the military, fighting in 3 different wars. She had seen impossible odds before. The aliens expected fear. They expected begging. They expected humanity to follow their rules. Open a channel to their command ship, she ordered. Jake looked surprised. Captain, shouldn't we contact the President first or the United Nations? Open the channel, Lieutenant. Jake's fingers moved across his console. Channel open, Captain. Lisa stepped forward, looking directly into the camera. Her voice was calm and steady. This is Captain Lisa Rodriguez of Earth Defense Command. We received your message, Commander. Zektar, here's our response. Come and take it. She nodded to Jake, who cut the transmission. The communication center fell silent. On the Vorthak command ship, Commander Zektar stared at the blank screen. His officers looked at each other in confusion. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded like this. Where was the panic? Where were the desperate pleas for mercy? Where were the surrender negotiations? What does "come and take it" mean? Asked his second in command. Zektar's tail twitched with irritation. It appears to be some form of primitive defiance. Run a scan of their military capabilities. The scan results appeared on his screen. Earth had perhaps 50 military vessels, all of them tiny compared to Vorthak ships. Their weapons were crude projectile systems and basic energy weapons. Their technology was at least 2 centuries behind Vorthak standards. They have no chance of victory, his weapons officer reported. Their entire fleet could not damage a single one of our ships. Zektar nodded. Then we proceed as planned. Begin the assault in 72 hours. Use standard formation approach. Target their military installations first, then accept their surrender. But as the hours passed, something strange began happening. Instead of gathering their leaders for surrender talks, The humans seemed to be preparing for war. Their military ships scattered in all directions. Their civilian vessels began moving away from major population centers. Most disturbing of all, their communications channels filled with something Zektar had never encountered before. Laughter. The humans were making jokes about the invasion. They were sharing pictures of their primitive weapons next to Vorthak warships with captions like, "David versus Goliath," and "Hold my beer and watch this." When the 72 hours ended, Zektar gave the order to attack. His fleet moved into perfect formation, exactly as they had done 17 times before. 200 massive warships arranged in precise geometric patterns, their weapons charged and ready. The human response was unlike anything in Vorthak military history. Instead of an organized fleet moving to meet them in battle, hundreds of small craft began emerging from everywhere. They came from behind asteroids, from the dark side of moons, from what appeared to be empty space. Some were clearly military vessels, but others looked like cargo haulers, passenger ships, even garbage collectors. "What is their formation?" Zektar demanded. His tactical officer studied the screen with growing confusion. "Sir, they don't appear to have a formation. They're moving in completely random patterns." As Zektar watched, a small human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward one of his heavy cruisers. The human vessel was maybe 1/10 the size of the Vorthak ship. It should have been trying to escape or surrender. Instead, it rammed directly into the cruiser's engine section and exploded. The Vorthak cruiser shuddered and began listing to one side, its engines damaged. Before Zektar could process what had happened, another human ship did the same thing to a different cruiser. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the humans. Put it on screen." The face that appeared was not a military commander or political leader. It was a middle-aged human male sitting in what appeared to be the cockpit of a cargo ship. Behind him, Zektar could see other humans loading what looked like explosives. "Hey there, lizard boy," the human said with a grin. "Welcome to Earth. Hope you brought a lunch because this is going to take a while." The transmission cut out just as the human's ship accelerated toward another Vorthak vessel. Zektar felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare: confusion. These humans were not following any known rules of combat. They were using their own ships as weapons. They were turning every available craft into a missile. They were sacrificing themselves without hesitation. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "we've lost 6 ships to ramming attacks. The humans appear to be using some kind of coordinated suicide tactic." Zektar studied the battle display. The human ships were not just randomly ramming his fleet. There was a pattern, but it was unlike any military strategy he had ever seen. They were targeting specific systems on his ships: engines, weapons, communication arrays. Each ramming attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage. But how were they coordinating without military communications? How were civilian cargo pilots performing maneuvers that would challenge his best fighter pilots? Another transmission came through. This time it was a young human female in what appeared to be a modified passenger shuttle. "This is Amy Patterson, calling all Earth forces," she said. "I've got a new toy to try out. Watch this." Her shuttle suddenly split apart, revealing that it had been disguised around a much smaller, faster ship loaded with explosives. The inner ship shot toward a Vorthak battleship like a bullet. Zektar realized with growing alarm that the humans were not just fighting his fleet. They were learning from each attack, adapting their tactics in real time, and sharing their discoveries instantly across their entire force. Nothing in his 3 centuries of military training had prepared him for an enemy like this. 3 weeks after the first battle, Commander Zektar stared at his tactical display with growing frustration. The blue dots representing human forces had vanished completely. Not destroyed, not retreated to defensive positions, just gone. His sensors showed empty space where the enemy fleet should be. "Report," he ordered his intelligence officer. "Sir, we have successfully scattered the human military forces. Their main fleet has been broken up. However, we are unable to locate their remaining ships for final elimination." Zektar's tail twitched with annoyance. What do you mean unable to locate them? They cannot simply disappear. Sir, our long-range sensors detect no organized human military presence anywhere in the system. This should have been good news. Sir, every previous conquest, scattering the enemy fleet was the final step before accepting surrender. But the humans were not sending surrender signals. Instead, something much worse was happening. 2 days ago, a Vorthak supply convoy had simply vanished between Mars and Jupiter. Yesterday, a patrol ship had gone silent near the asteroid belt. This morning, 3 more ships had stopped responding to communications. Each time, the last transmission was the same: wild human laughter followed by an explosion. Deep in the asteroid belt, Staff Sergeant Danny Torres floated in the command center of what had once been a mining asteroid. The rock was now hollowed out and filled with equipment salvaged from destroyed human ships, captured Vorthak technology, and weapons built from spare parts. Danny had been a Marine for 12 years before the invasion. He knew how to fight, but he also knew when traditional fighting would not work. The Vorthak had superior ships, better weapons, and overwhelming numbers, so Danny and his team had stopped trying to fight like a traditional military force. "Maria, what's the status on the cargo hauler?" Danny asked. Maria Santos had been a truck driver before the war. Now she was piloting a modified cargo ship that looked like space junk from the outside but carried enough explosives to crack a moon. "Ready to go, Sarge? The Vorthak patrol should pass through Sector 7 in about 2 hours. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them completely. We want to capture their equipment and make them afraid." "Got it. Hit and run. Leave them confused." Danny nodded. This was how humans fought now. They appeared from nowhere, struck fast, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. Every attack served 3 purposes: damage the enemy, steal their technology, and prove that nowhere was safe. The key was unpredictability. The Vorthak expected military formations and standard tactics. Instead, they got cargo ships that exploded, medical vessels that launched missiles, and communication signals that made no sense. "Bobby, how's our new toy coming along?" Danny asked. "Engineer." Bobby Chen looked up from a workbench covered with Vorthak technology. Before the war, Bobby had repaired air conditioning systems. Now he was building weapons that the aliens had never imagined. "Almost ready, Sarge. I've figured out how to reverse their shield generators. Instead of protecting their ships, this will overload their electrical systems. We plant it on their hull, activate it remotely, and their own shields will fry every circuit on the ship." "How long to build more?" "Give me a week and I can make 20 of them." This was the human advantage that the Vorthak could not understand. Every human seemed capable of becoming an engineer, a warrior, or a spy. A truck driver became a starship pilot. An air conditioning repairman became a weapons designer. A bartender became a master of psychological warfare. "Amy, what's our next communication strategy?" Danny asked. Amy Patterson had been a radio DJ before the invasion. Now she was in charge of driving the Vorthak crazy with broadcasts that made no logical sense but somehow worked perfectly. "Tonight we're broadcasting Earth music during their sleep cycles," Amy said with a grin. "I've got a playlist ready: death metal, bagpipe music, and children's songs played backwards. Then we're going to interrupt with random human phrases translated into their language." "What kind of phrases?" "Things like 'your shoelaces are untied,' and 'the fish are watching you,' and 'have you tried turning it off and on again?' Stuff that means nothing but will make them paranoid." Danny laughed. The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had expected. Captured Vorthak soldiers reported that their own troops were becoming afraid of human communications. They never knew if a message was a real threat, a practical joke, or just nonsense designed to waste their time. "Contact in Sector 7. Maria's voice came through the communication system. "Vorthak patrol ship right on schedule." Danny moved to the tactical display. The Vorthak ship was exactly where their calculations had predicted. The aliens were creatures of habit, following patrol routes and schedules that never changed. Humans had learned to use this predictability against them. "Remember, we want them alive for questioning," Danny said. "Amy, start the music." Heavy, metal guitar riffs began broadcasting on all Vorthak communication frequencies. The alien ship immediately began trying to jam the signal, but Amy had prepared for this. Every time they blocked one frequency, the music switched to another. Maria's cargo hauler drifted toward the patrol ship, looking like a piece of space debris. The Vorthak sensors would detect metal and electronics, but the signature matched thousands of other pieces of junk floating in the asteroid belt. When Maria was within 50 meters of the target, she activated Bobby's new weapon. The device attached itself to the Vorthak hull using magnetic clamps, then began overloading their shield system. The alien ship's lights flickered as its electrical systems failed. Emergency power kicked in, but the damage was done. Their weapons, communications, and engines were all offline. "This is the part they really hate," Amy said, switching the music to a cheerful children's song about sharing and friendship. Danny suited up for boarding action. The Vorthak would expect a standard military assault, armed soldiers moving in formation, following rules of engagement. Instead, they got something much worse. Danny approached their airlock wearing a bright yellow maintenance uniform with "Have a nice day" written in English across the chest. He was carrying a toolbox instead of a rifle. When the Vorthak opened their airlock, they found a human who looked like a repair technician. "Hi there," Danny said cheerfully in broken Vorthak language. "I'm here to fix your ship," someone called. "About electrical problems?" The confused aliens let him aboard before they realized their mistake. By then, Danny had disabled their internal security system, and his team was already boarding through the cargo bay. 20 minutes later, the Vorthak patrol ship was under human control. The alien crew was locked in their own holding cells, and Bobby was already studying their technology for weaknesses. "What should we do with the ship?" Maria asked. "Paint it bright pink and send it back to their fleet," Danny decided. "With a note that says, 'Thanks for the loaner, we'll return it when we're done.'" Amy was already recording a message to broadcast on all Vorthak frequencies. "Attention Vorthak fleet, this is Earth customer service. We've received your patrol ship for repairs. Please allow 3 to 5 business days for processing. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for choosing humanity for all your military needs." Commander. Zektar received the transmission 6 hours later. He stared at the screen showing his patrol ship painted bright pink with human writing all over the hull. His own crew was visible through the windows, waving what appeared to be surrender flags made from their underwear. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "they're also broadcasting a recipe for something called chocolate chip cookies on our emergency frequencies." Zektar felt a headache building behind his eyes. Nothing in 3 centuries of military training had prepared him for this kind of warfare. The humans were not just fighting his fleet, they were mocking it. They were turning war into some kind of bizarre entertainment. "Sir, we're receiving 17 more signals from the asteroid belt," the communications officer continued. "They appear to be humans arguing about sports scores and someone's grandmother's birthday party." Zektar realized with growing horror that the humans were not just hiding in the asteroid belt. They were living there, turning every rock into a potential base, every piece of debris into a potential weapon. They had made the entire solar system into their battlefield, and they were fighting by rules that did not exist in any military manual. Dr. Helen Brooks sat across from the captured Vorthak soldier in the makeshift interrogation room. The alien's green scales were pale with stress, and his large yellow eyes kept darting around the room as if expecting another human trick. Helen had been a psychology professor before the war. Now she was humanity's leading expert on alien behavior, and what she had learned was changing everything about how humans fought. "Tell me about your military training," Helen said gently. The Vorthak soldier, who called himself Crix, shifted uncomfortably. "We trained for 3 years in proper combat procedures. We learn formations, protocols, honor codes. We study the wars of 17 conquered worlds." "What did those worlds do when you arrived?" "They followed the rules," Crix said. "They gathered their leaders. They negotiated surrender terms. They accepted defeat with honor when resistance became impossible." Helen nodded and made notes. "And what do you think of human fighting methods?" Crix's scales rippled with what Helen had learned was the Vorthak equivalent of a shudder. "Your people do not fight, they play games, they make jokes. They turn everything into chaos. It is not war, it is madness. But it's working, Helen pointed out. That is what makes it so terrible, Crix whispered. Helen left the interrogation room with new understanding. The Vorthak were not just losing because humans had better tactics. They were losing because humans fought in ways that went against everything the aliens believed about war, honor, and civilization. Meanwhile, on the bridge of his command ship, Commander Zektar was receiving the worst news of his military career. His aide, a young officer named Vex, approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, we have received new orders from High Command." Zektar looked up from studying battle reports that made no sense. "What are our orders?" "High Command is sending Admiral Thrak with reinforcements. You are to conclude this campaign within 30 days or face court-martial for incompetence." Zektar's claws dug into his command chair. Admiral Thrak was his rival, a younger officer who had won easy victories against primitive worlds. Thrak would arrive expecting to find a situation that could be resolved with standard military procedure. "How can I explain to them that the enemy does not follow any rules?" Zektar muttered. His question was answered by another bizarre human transmission. This time, it was a middle-aged human male sitting in what appeared to be a military command center, but the walls were covered with children's drawings and pictures of small furry animals. "Greetings, Commander Zektar," the human said cheerfully. "This is Captain Pete Johnson of the Reformed Earth Defense Fleet. We understand you're having some difficulties with our unconventional approach to warfare." Zektar leaned forward. Finally, a human military officer who might be willing to negotiate like a civilized being. "We've prepared a demonstration of our latest tactical innovations," Captain Johnson continued. "Please direct your attention to coordinates 127.4 by 85.7. We think you'll find it educational." The transmission ended. Zektar quickly ordered his sensors to focus on those coordinates. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Floating in space was what appeared to be a human evacuation fleet. Dozens of civilian ships, obviously carrying refugees from Earth. They were moving in a slow, predictable pattern toward the outer planets. It was exactly the kind of target that Vorthak doctrine said to ignore. Civilian non-combatants were not legitimate military targets, but Zektar had learned not to trust anything the humans did. "Full sensor scan of those ships," he ordered. The results were disturbing. The ships were indeed carrying civilians, thousands of them, but they were also carrying massive amounts of military equipment, weapons that had been disguised as humanitarian, supplies and communication gear that was more advanced than anything in the Vorthak fleet. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "those civilian ships are broadcasting on 17 different military frequencies simultaneously. They appear to be coordinating with hidden forces throughout the system." Before Zektar could decide how to respond, the civilian fleet did something impossible. Every ship suddenly accelerated far beyond what civilian engines should be capable of. The slow evacuation convoy transformed into a high-speed assault force, but they were not attacking his fleet directly. Instead, they were heading for his supply depot near Jupiter. "Intercept course maximum speed," Zektar ordered. "Sir, if we pursue them, we leave our main battle group undefended. They are forcing us to choose between protecting our supplies and maintaining formation," Zektar realized. This is another of their tricks. He was right. As his ships moved to intercept the fake civilian convoy, human forces that had been hiding throughout the system began emerging from everywhere. Not to attack his weakened main fleet, but to attack targets he had not even considered defending. Human ships appeared near his communication relay stations, his fuel processing plants, his repair facilities. Every piece of infrastructure that kept his fleet operational was suddenly under attack by forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. The worst part was the messages. Each human attack group was broadcasting personal communications directed at specific Vorthak officers. "Hey, Zektar," came a voice over his personal communication channel. "Nice haircut. Did you do it yourself?" "Attention Officer Vex," came another transmission. "Your mother called. She wants to know when you're coming home for dinner." "Commander, this is Maintenance Crew Alpha. We've noticed your ship has a scratch on the port side. Would you like us to buff that out for you?" The humans had somehow learned the names, ranks, and personal details of his entire crew. They were treating the war like a personal conversation with each individual Vorthok soldier. Zektar watched his tactical display as his carefully organized fleet fell apart. His ships were scattered across the system, chasing targets that led them into traps, responding to threats that turned out to be distractions, trying to protect assets that were already destroyed. "Sir," Vex reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the civilian convoy." The main screen activated, showing a human female in a maintenance uniform. Behind her, Zektar could see Vorthak equipment being operated by what appeared to be human children and elderly civilians. "Hi there, Commander," the woman said with a bright smile. "This is Maria Santos with Earth Logistics Division. We wanted to thank you for the donation of military supplies. The kids especially love the gravity generators. They're using them for a new game called Bounce the Vorthak." The camera panned to show several captured Vorthak soldiers being gently bounced up and down in altered gravity fields, while human children laughed and clapped. "Don't worry about your people," Maria continued. "We're feeding them well. Do Vorthak like pizza?" "We've never made pizza for lizard people before, but we're willing to try." The transmission ended with the sound of human laughter, and what appeared to be Vorthak soldiers cautiously trying Earth food. Zektar realized that the humans had not just captured his supplies and personnel, they had turned his own soldiers into participants in some kind of bizarre cultural exchange program. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "we're receiving surrender requests from the asteroid belt." "Finally," Zektar said with relief. "Accept their surrender immediately." "Sir, I think you misunderstood. The surrender requests are from our own forces. 17 of our ships in the asteroid belt are requesting permission to surrender to the humans." Zektar stared at the communications officer in shock. "What?" "They report that the humans have offered them better food, more comfortable quarters, and educational programs about Earth culture. Several of our soldiers have specifically requested to stay as prisoners rather than return to duty." Zektar felt something crack inside his mind. His own troops were surrendering not because they were defeated, but because they preferred being prisoners of the humans to fighting them. On the screen, a new transmission appeared. This time it was Dr. Helen Brooks, sitting in what appeared to be a classroom with a dozen Vorthak soldiers taking notes. "Commander Zektar," she said politely, "we've been having wonderful conversations with your people. They're very interested in human culture, especially our music and food. We were wondering if you'd like to join our cultural exchange program. We think you'd find it much more enjoyable than this whole war business." Behind her, a Vorthak soldier raised his hand like a student in school. "Dr. Brooks, can you explain again why humans put pineapple on pizza? My people find this concept fascinating but confusing." Zektar turned off the transmission and sat in stunned silence. The humans had weaponized hospitality. They were defeating his forces by being nice to them. Admiral Thrak arrived with 200 fresh warships and absolute confidence that he could end what Commander Zektar had failed to finish. The younger Vorthak officer stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the tactical reports with growing disbelief. "You allowed primitives to scatter your entire fleet?" Thrak asked with obvious contempt. Zektar's scales darkened with shame and anger. "Admiral, the humans do not fight according to any known military doctrine. They use tactics that are impossible to predict or counter." "Nonsense," Thrak snapped. "Every species follows basic patterns of warfare. You simply lack the skill to recognize them." Thrak turned to his fleet commanders. "We will demonstrate proper military procedure, form standard battle formation, and advance on the human homeworld. When they see overwhelming force properly deployed, they will surrender as all civilized species do." Admiral Kevin Murphy watched the approaching Vorthak fleet from the bridge of his rebuilt command ship. The human officer had gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice was steady as he addressed his fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Murphy. The lizards have brought friends to the party. Time to show them what Earth hospitality really looks like." Kevin had been fighting wars for 30 years. But nothing had prepared him for commanding a fleet that included everything from military battleships to armed garbage haulers. His forces were spread across the solar system in what appeared to be random positions, but Kevin knew better. "Lisa, Are your people ready? Captain Lisa Rodriguez, now commanding a squadron of modified civilian ships, responded immediately. Ready, Admiral. My grandmother's knitting circle is particularly excited about this one. Danny, status report from the asteroid belt. Staff Sergeant Danny Torres's voice crackled through space. We've got surprises planted everywhere, Admiral. The lizards are going to hate this. Amy, how's our communication set up? Amy Patterson, still broadcasting from her hidden base, laughed. We've got the galaxy's best playlist ready to go. I've included some opera, death metal, and children's birthday party songs. Plus, we've learned some Vorthak curse words from our prisoners. Admiral Thrax's fleet moved into perfect formation, exactly as Vorthak military doctrine required. 200 massive warships arranged in geometric precision, their weapons charged and ready for a decisive battle. Kevin Murphy smiled as he watched them approach. The Vorthak were doing exactly what humans wanted them to do, fighting predictably. All ships execute Plan Chaos, Kevin ordered. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come, though no alien species would ever truly understand it. The human fleet did not charge forward to meet the enemy. Instead, they began what could only be described as a performance. Every ship movement, every weapon firing, every communication was coordinated not just for tactical effect, but for psychological impact. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez, Lisa's younger brother, led the first wave of fighter pilots, but instead of attacking in formation, they moved in patterns that seemed to dance through space. They used Earth's moon as a gravitational slingshot, spinning around it in spirals that looked random, but were precisely calculated. What are they doing? Admiral Thrak demanded as he watched human fighters trace impossible paths through space. Sir, they appear to be dancing, his tactical officer reported with confusion. The human fighters were indeed dancing, but they were also attacking. Each graceful movement brought them into perfect position to strike Vorthak weak points. They coordinated their assault using the rhythm of classical music that was being broadcast on all frequencies. This is Earth Defense calling all forces. Amy's voice rang out across space. Today's battle will be performed to Beethoven's Symphony No. 9. Please sync your movements to the tempo. Admiral Thrak watched in horror as the human fleet began moving in time with alien music he could not understand. Their attacks came not in waves or formations, but in musical phrases that built to crescendos of devastating firepower. But the humans were not just fighting to a soundtrack. They were telling a story. Captain Pete Johnson's squadron performed the opening movement, emerging from behind Jupiter like actors taking the stage. His ships moved in formation that painted pictures in space. Eagles, flags, symbols that meant nothing to aliens but everything to humans watching from Earth. Danny Torres's asteroid belt forces provided percussion, their hidden weapons firing in rhythm with the music. Each explosion was timed not just for maximum damage, but for maximum dramatic effect. The psychological impact was devastating. Vorthak officers found themselves unable to predict when attacks would come, because the timing was based on human art rather than military logic. Their computers could not calculate patterns based on musical composition and creative expression. Sir, we cannot establish targeting locks, Thrak's weapons officer reported. The enemy ships are moving according to some kind of artistic pattern. Our systems cannot analyze. Impossible, Thrak snarled. Override the computers. Target manually. But manual targeting failed too. Human pilots like Sam Rodriguez were using Earth's atmosphere as cover, diving through the thin upper layers to change direction in ways that defied physics. They emerged from atmospheric dives at impossible angles, their ships trailing fire, like shooting stars. Maria Santos, still commanding her disguised cargo hauler, provided the comedy relief. Her ship appeared to be fleeing in panic, broadcasting messages about being a harmless civilian vessel. When Vorthak ships moved to intercept what looked like an easy target, they discovered that her cargo was actually a massive bomb designed to look like medical supplies. This is civilian freighter, definitely not a weapon, Maria broadcast. We are carrying humanitarian aid including bandages, medicine, and totally not explosives. The explosion that followed took out 3 Vorthak cruisers. But the masterstroke came when the music reached its final movement. Admiral Murphy's entire fleet suddenly converged on a single point in space, their movements perfectly synchronized. For a moment, it looked like they were forming a traditional battle formation. Then, they did something impossible. Using quantum communication networks that operated on principles of controlled chaos, the entire human fleet executed a maneuver that appeared random but was actually precisely calculated to exploit every weakness in Vorthak tactical doctrine. Every human ship fired at the exact same moment, but their weapons had been modified to create interference patterns. The combined energy beams wove through space like light through a prism, creating destructive harmonics that turned the Vorthak fleet's own shields against them. Admiral Thrak watched his mighty fleet tear itself apart as their own defensive systems amplified the human attack. Ships that should have been protected were destroyed by energy waves that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "How is this possible?" Thrak whispered. His answer came in the form of a transmission from Admiral Murphy. The human officer appeared on screen, sitting calmly in his command chair with a cup of coffee. "Admiral Thrak, this is Kevin Murphy. We've been studying your people for months now. You fight like you think war is a mathematical equation with a predictable solution. But war isn't math. War is art. And humans have been making art for thousands of years." Behind Murphy, the bridge crew was celebrating with what appeared to be a pizza party. Humans were eating, laughing, and treating the greatest space battle in galactic history like a successful office project. "We're transmitting surrender terms to your remaining ships," Murphy continued. "Don't worry, we'll treat your people well. We've got board games, cooking classes, and movie nights planned. Most of your soldiers seem to prefer our prison camps to your military service anyway." The transmission ended with the sound of human laughter and someone asking if anybody wanted extra cheese on their pizza. Commander Zektar, watching from his damaged ship, finally understood what he had been fighting all along. The humans had not just defeated the Vorthak military. They had proven that the entire Vorthak understanding of warfare was wrong. War was not about following rules or maintaining honor or achieving tactical objectives. War was about convincing your enemy that continuing to fight was pointless, and humans had done that by fighting in ways so chaotic, creative, and unpredictable that resistance seemed futile. 6 months later, Commander Zektar sat in a comfortable chair in Dr. Helen Brooks's classroom, along with dozens of other former Vorthak officers. They were learning about human culture, participating in cooking classes, and discovering that Earth had things called hobbies that people did just for fun. "The key insight," Dr. Brooks explained, "is that humans don't just adapt to challenges. We treat every problem as an opportunity to be creative. When you tried to conquer us using traditional methods, we responded by inventing new forms of warfare that had never existed before." Zektar raised his hand. "Dr. Brooks, I have been wondering about something. Why did you let us surrender? You could have destroyed our fleets completely." Helen smiled. "Because the goal was never to destroy you, Commander. The goal was to make friends. Humans have learned that former enemies often become the best allies. We'd rather have you helping us explore the galaxy than fighting us for it." Zektar looked around the classroom at his fellow former enemies, all of them learning to appreciate human food, music, and humor. He realized that the